Welcome back. Impeachment is headed to the Senate. House Democrats voted yesterday to send the articles for a Senate trial, which will likely begin next week on Tuesday. Speaker Nancy Pelosi announcing the impeachment managers and defending those articles yesterday. They include House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler. There are a total of 7 managers that will handle this on the Democrat side. Joining me right now is former senior advisor to President George W. Bush, Fox News contributor Karl Rove. Karl, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for weighing in here.
You bet. Morning.
So the day was supposedly so somber, yet Nancy Pelosi, well, she was handing out pens to colleagues, and we have a picture of those pens. I want to get your take on this. These pens look like bullet cases. And Washington Examiner is reporting that on the pen, the word united was spelt wrong. What's your take on yesterday's yesterday's happenings?
Well, I was a little bit taken aback. There was a very strong hint that unless you agreed with Nancy Pelosi in the House indictment of President Trump, that you were somehow unpatriotic, un-American, and against the Constitution. This was epitomized by Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler's comment that the Senate was disgusting. I mean, this is not exactly, the kind of committee and the seriousness that you think you'd approach this kind of a important action with. But the House rushed to a decision, dawdled during the Christmas holidays and New Year's holidays before transferring the document to the Senate. But the language, I think, was intemperate and over the top and highly partisan.
Do you think that the president will be removed from office? What's your take on the evidence that the Democrats will present next week on Tuesday in this Senate trial to back up these articles? Yeah.
I don't think there's a sentient being on the face of the planet who thinks that there's a strong likelihood the president's going to be removed from office. He's not going to be. Look, do I like the fact that the president wanted to try and get the Ukrainians to investigate Hunter Biden? No, I don't. We knew everything we needed to know about that already due to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal doing investigations of this. So we already knew that. We didn't need to have additional information from the Ukrainians. But is it an impeachable offense? No, it's not. Look, remember in 2012, we caught President Obama on tape saying to the the Prime Minister of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, said, Dmitry, with regard to missile defense and other issues, tell Vladimir this is my last election and I'll have more flexibility after the election. Talk about putting the security of the United States in a political context. Leave me alone during the election and I'll give you concessions on missile defense after the election is over. And did anyone at that moment suggest that President Obama should be impeached? No.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
This is if they were angry with him, they should have passed a censure motion. They have highly politicized and diminished this important power that we need to have in our Constitution and in our system, the ability to remove a president for actually violating the law. Look, Republicans overreached with Bill Clinton. We look back now and see that, despite the fact that he had violated the law, lied under oath, and lost his law license as a result of it. But still, the American people didn't support it. And this time around, I think,
Go ahead.
Exactly.
Finish your thought. Yep.
Well, this time around, we're in a highly polarized environment. The Senate is not going to have 20 Republicans break and vote to remove the president from office. They're going to end up having more Democrats vote to keep the president in office, in my opinion, than there are to Republicans to remove him.
Yeah, and it's not like there's nothing there. I mean, let me bring Dagan in, because Dagan, if there was nothing there in terms of Hunter Biden, that's a different story. But in fact, he did travel on the then vice president's plane, Air Force Two, to go to China, and then his hedge fund got $1.5 billion from China, and he did make $60,000 a year from Burisma, being on the board of that Ukraine company. So there, while his father was vice president, but that's sort of like that's gone away. That's not being spoken about.
The background that Americans remember, Americans who voted for President Trump, is the Russia collusion narrative that was not only pushed by the Democrats, but by their colleagues in the media. And that was, well, we've spent billions of dollars on the Robert Mueller investigation, and there was nothing there. There was no abuse of the intelligence surveillance powers by people within the FBI. We've yet to find out, get to the real bottom of what was going on in the intelligence community. That's the backdrop. But this is all political, and we've said that. But, Karl, I want to ask you, clearly in the Senate, it seems to be, and Mitch McConnell has accused him of this, Chuck Schumer's doing, to try and ensure that I think that there are 24 Republicans in the Senate who are up for, or seats that are up for re-election or up for election.
Yeah.
How many?
23.
23. So of those Republicans, he's trying to basically make sure that they can't get elected.
Yeah, well, look, the Democrats are very pointed about this. Cory Gardner in Colorado, Martha McSally in Arizona, Susan Collins in Maine, to a lesser extent, Tom Tillis in North Carolina. They want to put them in a political box. And they want them to do things that will appease the Democrats in the hope of keeping their seats. We also, unfortunately, it's not just simply Democrats doing this. We now have Rand Paul out there saying, unless you vote exactly as I want you to vote, I'm going to go in and stir up opposition to you, my fellow Republicans in your home states. This has become far too partisan, far too political. This ought to be a somber, restrained moment, not a moment for people to go out there and engage in this kind of political falderall. And yeah, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats now, they recognize they're not going to remove the president from office. What they're trying to do is use this as an ability both to defeat him in the fall election and by tarnishing him, and to defeat Republican senators who don't go along with whatever they want them to do.
Yeah. Meanwhile, there are 4 senators that will have to be stuck in jury duty, stuck in that trial. You have, while the Iowa caucuses began, in your latest op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, you point out that now the race is still too close to call, that things are especially shaky for Joe Biden. One Iowa poll from last week shows that the former vice president leading with 24% of the vote, but another shows him falling 9 percentage points to 4th place. Karl, is there any way to tell who's going to come out on top in Iowa, and what can you tell us in terms as we navigate these caucuses going into the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, look, the individual polls sometimes vary, and you're right. The Monmouth poll has Biden in the lead with 24, and the Des Moines Register poll, the Seltzer and Company poll, has him in 4th place with 15%. If you add in the third poll conducted late in December, it's essentially a dead heat between Biden and Sanders, with Buttigieg in 3rd and Warren in 4th. I don't know how it's going to come out. I do think specifically, but I do think generally this, that it's going to be very close, that if you look at the difference in the number of delegates, the 41 delegates, I think are going to largely be divided roughly equally. I think there'll be at least 4 candidates who statewide will get more than 15%, Biden, Warren, Sanders, and Buttigieg. But I think Klobuchar may get a delegate or 2. Remember, there are 2 things you got to keep in mind. First of all, you got to get 15%. And second of all, if your candidate doesn't get 15% in your own caucus, 1,681 individual caucuses, if your candidate doesn't get 15%, you're told pick another candidate or go home. So those second choices matter, and second choices look like they benefit more Warren and Sanders than they do Buttigieg and Biden. But it really depends on your individual caucus and the individual standing and the second choices of the people in those individual caucuses. So it becomes so many variables, it becomes hard to predict specific outcomes. But I do think traditionally there have been 3 people who get a ticket punched out of Iowa. I think it's going to be at least 4.